Welcome. For those of you finding me for the first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Jonathan Tabius Abry. It is my pleasure to help bring some of the notes from Aisha's early life. Before Avery, before the stones. She gave me permission to share some of her notes with you. So, shall we continue? There are fragments from Aisha's early years that were not understood when they first occurred, only recognized much later. Let her own words, not of magic, not of things that many do not face, and many brush off as just imagination. But what if, like for Aisha, it is more than that?
There are moments in life when things don't change loudly, they change quietly. You don't always notice them at first. A feeling that something is different, a sense that reality isn't quite as fixed as it once seemed. This is how my story, this part of my story, begins. It doesn't begin in a world of magic. It begins in a world very much like ours, like yours. School life. The ordinary rhythm of days. But beneath that ordinary surface, something else is already beginning to stir. Moments that don't quite make sense. Dreams that feel more real than waking life. A sense of being aware of something just beyond perception. Not frightening, just unfamiliar. And then, slowly, the world begins to feel less stable than it once was. This is not a story about escape. It is not my musings about doing that. It is a story about awareness. What I am sensing. About what happens when a human being begins to notice that reality may be far larger than what we have been taught to see. And so I begin, not with answers, but with noticing. And this is taking me right back to that very beginning. There was a moment when noticing became something more. It didn't arrive as an answer. It arrived as a feeling that I couldn't quite place and can't quite ignore. For me, it began in the smallest of ways, not with something dramatic, but with something almost easy to dismiss. A sound in the night, familiar, and yet different. The wind moved through the trees outside my window, branches brushing softly against the glass, a rhythm I had heard many times before. But one night, that sound changed. Not louder, not sharper, just deliberate, as though it wasn't just the wind anymore. At first I told myself it was nothing, that it was just my imagination, that my mind was turning something ordinary into something else. But the feeling didn't leave. It stayed with me, quieter, persistently, waiting. And then came the voice. Not from outside, not from the room, but from somewhere I couldn't quite locate. It was clear, calm, certain. Aisha. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not fear exactly, but something deeper. The awareness that this was real. I sat up, listened, looked around the room. Nothing had changed. Everything looked exactly as it always had. And yet, everything felt different. I answered without thinking. Yes? The silence that followed felt longer than it should have been. Then the voice returned. Aisha, this space is not right. There was no anger in it, no threat, only certainty. And something else, something that made my heart begin to race. It knew me. It used my name. Should I be afraid? Most would have been, but alongside the fear, there was something else. Recognition, as though this wasn't entirely new, as though somewhere, deep inside, this moment had always been waiting. I looked around again, turned on the light, checked every corner of the room. There was no one there, and yet the presence remained. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid to close my eyes, but because I wasn't sure what I might see if I did, or who might be waiting. But something had already changed. Something that couldn't be undone. The world hadn't opened, not yet, but it had answered.
What she did not yet understand was that this moment would not remain isolated. It would return, in ways she could not yet see. Next time we will continue and hear what happened next.